All right, strap yourselves in because we are going deep today.
Yeah.
We're diving into Jordan Peterson's We Who Wrestle with God.
Oh, a good one.
This book, man, it's been really messing with my head.
It's pretty intense.
In a good way, though. Like, even if you're not, like, super religious or anything,
Yeah, right.
Peterson's way of looking at these old biblical stories,
Yeah.
it's wild.
I know what you mean.
It's like he sees them less as like,
Dogma.
yeah, dogma or like, rules to live by, but more like these maps,
Yeah.
ancient maps for figuring out how to deal with all the craziness life throws at you.
Exactly. He's like, look, these stories have been around forever for a reason.
Right. There's got to be something in there.
Yeah.
Something important.
Some wisdom.
Yeah, wisdom. Something that still matters today,
Absolutely.
And one of the things that really grabbed me right away was this idea of subduing and naming.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Which he connects to, like the Adam and Eve story in Genesis.
Right at the beginning.
Yeah, it's like,
how we make sense of the world.
Yeah. How we, like, as humans, wrap our heads around everything.
It's not about, like, controlling nature.
No.
It's more about,
understanding it.
Yeah, and, like, seeing the patterns.
Yes. Creating order out of all the chaos.
I love how he puts it.
Always got a great line about it.
Yeah, what is it?
Okay, so he says,
I'm ready.
Adam subdues and names.
Okay.
These are the actions or even the essence of human consciousness.
Wow.
Right.
It's so simple, but so profound.
It's like, whoa.
It really makes you think.
It makes you think about, like, everything.
Yeah, like
how we...
like how we organize our homes.
Right. Putting labels on things.
Yes. Or like even the way we try to understand our feelings,
Totally. Like we're constantly trying to put names to things.
We are.
We're trying to categorize. Yeah. We're trying to like make sense of it all,
It's like this inherent human drive.
It is. And it's all part of this like...
subduing and naming.
Yes.
It's fascinating.
It is.
And that's just like the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah. I mean, then he gets into Eve.
Oh.
And that's where things get even more, I don't know. Juicy, yeah. And maybe a little controversial.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because his interpretation of Eve, it's not the typical,
evil temptress.
Yeah, the temptress thing, right, that you always hear.
He sees her as something way deeper.
He does, yeah.
Something tied to, like, the unconscious and all the stuff we don't even know about yet.
Yeah. The mysteries.
Okay, so
yeah.
If Adam is like the conscious mind, right? The part of us that's trying to define everything and put it in neat little boxes.
Right.
What does that make Eve, in Peterson's view?
Well, he says she represents, like, everything that hasn't been brought into the light of consciousness yet. Ooh, I like that.
It's like she's that voice whispering from the shadows.
Oh, that's good.
Challenging Adam's tidy little categories.
Right, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Right?
Not at all. In fact, he even points to the Hebrew word for Eve.
Okay.
Ezer kenegdo.
I've heard that before.
Which means, like, helpmeet,
Right. Like a partner?
Yeah, it suggests this, like, partnership.
Right,
this force that stands opposite Adam, but also, like, completes him.
It's like she's bringing a whole other perspective to the table.
Exactly.
One that Adam hasn't even considered.
Exactly. But here's the catch, and this is where the temptation comes in.
Ooh, okay.
Peterson argues that Eve's temptation is in believing that her compassion is, like, all-powerful.
Interesting.
That she can transform even poison into nourishment.
Whoa, that's a heavy idea.
It is, right.
It's like, it's not that she's evil.
No, not even.
But it's about the potential dangers of, like, unchecked compassion.
Right, exactly.
Of not recognizing that, sometimes there's real darkness out there.
It's a tricky balance, isn't it?
It is.
Like recognizing the power of compassion, but also knowing that sometimes you can't just, like, hug the darkness away.
It's like he's saying we need both Adam and Eve.
We do.
Both the conscious and the unconscious. To really, like, figure out how to live in this crazy world.
To navigate the complexities.
Yes, exactly.
And that's just scratching the surface. We haven't even gotten to Cain and Abel yet.
Oh, man, Cain and Abel.
And a whole other
can of worms.
We're going to have to take a break.
Okay, yeah, we need
But when we come back, we're going to dive into that and so much more.
Can't wait.
So stick around.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back. So Cain and Abel, huh?
Oh, man. That story.
That's a tough one.
It really gets to you,
Jealousy, betrayal.
It's like, it's so primal.
It is, right?
Like, it just taps into something so deep in the human psyche.
It makes you wonder about, like, the roots of violence.
Yeah, where does it all come from?
Peterson's take on it is, well, it's pretty intense.
Oh, it is, but it's also, like, oddly hopeful in a way.
How so?
Well, because he connects it to this idea of the mark of Cain,
Right. Right.
which, in the Bible, it's like this symbol of both punishment and protection.
It's like this paradox.
It is. And Peterson, he really dives into that.
He does.
He's like, even someone who's done something truly terrible, like even Cain, who murdered his own brother,
Yeah.
he still needs a certain level of protection.
Interesting.
Not just for his own sake,
Right?
but for the sake of, like, maintaining order in society.
That's a tough one to swallow.
It is. Right. It's like,
You want justice.
you want justice, but you also...
But chaos isn't the answer either.
Exactly. And Peterson, he argues that this mark of Cain,
Yeah.
it's like this representation of, like, the law.
The law.
Yeah, and the spirit of the law
Like,
extending its protection,
to everyone.
even to the perpetrator.
What?
To protect not only the perpetrator, he says, but also the victim.
In the deepest possible sense.
Yes. And the stability of society itself.
That's a lot to unpack.
It is, right. It's a
Okay.
really challenging idea.
It is.
But it makes you think about, like, the complexities of good and evil and how those forces play out
In our own lives.
in our own lives and in the world around us.
We like to think things are black and white.
We do, but
It's just not that simple.
it's so much more complicated than that.
Right.
And Peterson, he's not afraid to, like, dive into that complexity.
He's not giving us easy answers.
He's not. He's making us wrestle with these ideas.
Which is what the book's title is all about, right?
Exactly. We who wrestle with God.
Wrestling with these big questions, these moral dilemmas.
It's uncomfortable,
Oh, yeah.
but it's also, I think, incredibly important.
Absolutely.
And speaking of wrestling with big ideas,
What else, Seaback?
he also gets into this whole thing about sacrifice,
Sacrifice, yeah.
which, it's a recurring theme in the Bible.
For sure.
But Peterson's take on it is, well, it's pretty intense.
How so?
He's not talking about, like,
Giving up chocolate for Lent.
yeah. He's talking about real sacrifice,
Like the hard stuff.
the hard stuff, the stuff that, like, really costs you something.
The stuff that changes you.
Exactly. And he uses the story of Abraham and Isaac to really drive this point home.
Oh, man. Abraham and Isaac.
I know, right? Talk about a tough story.
It's brutal.
It is. I mean, you've got Abraham,
Yeah.
who finally, after years of waiting, has a son. And then God tells him to sacrifice Isaac.
As a test of faith.
I know. Can you imagine?
It's almost unfathomable.
It is. And Peterson, he doesn't shy away from that.
He doesn't.
He's like, this is a terrible thing
To be asked to do.
to be asked to do, to even contemplate.
But he also says
Yeah.
that there's something even worse.
Oh, yeah. He's got that line.
What is it?
It is a terrible thing to offer a son or daughter to God. But it is a positively hellish thing, an offering to the darkest abyss.
Right.
To fail to do so.
Wow.
Heavy, right?
It's heavy stuff.
And it makes you think about, like,
What are we sacrificing?
yeah, what are we sacrificing? What are we holding on to?
That then we need to let go of.
Yes. That's maybe even holding us back from, like,
True growth.
true growth,
Yeah.
transformation.
It's like he's saying sometimes you have to give up something.
You do.
Something precious.
To really gain something even more valuable.
To become who you're meant to be.
And that's where this whole idea, the call to adventure, comes in.
Oh, yeah, the call to adventure.
He talks about how these biblical stories, they're like maps for navigating life's challenges.
Just like blueprints for the hero's journey.
Yes, exactly. And he sees it in characters like Abraham,
Obviously.
but also in Moses,
Leading his people out of slavery.
and even in Jonah.
Jonah running away from his calling.
I know, ending up in the belly of the whale.
That's a pretty intense adventure.
It is, right. But it's like,
It's like he's saying,
you can't escape your destiny.
you can try.
You can try, but eventually
The universe will catch up to you.
it will. And sometimes it takes something pretty dramatic
A whale swallowing you whole.
to wake you up, to get you back on track.
To make you face your fears.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about Peterson's take on these stories.
What's that?
He's not just, like, retelling them.
No.
He's showing us how they're still relevant today.
How they're playing out in our own lives.
Yes. In our own struggles, our own fears, our own attempts to run away from what we're meant to do.
It's like he's holding up a mirror.
He is. And saying, look, this is you.
This is your journey.
This is your call to adventure.
And are you going to answer it?
Or you keep running.
Because running never really works, does it?
It doesn't. The whale will always find you.
Sooner or later.
Sooner or later.
Yeah.
So you might as well face your fears.
And embrace the adventure.
Embrace the adventure. And that's what we're going to be talking about more after the break. So stick around.
Yeah.
All right. So we're back. And, we've been talking about all these big ideas in Peterson's book.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is. But one thing that really stood out to me
What's that?
is how he looks at the feminine.
Oh, yeah, his take on Eve and all that.
It's pretty wild, right?
It is. It really makes you rethink things.
It does, because it's not like the typical...
The temptress.
Yeah, the temptress thing you always hear about.
Yeah, right.
He sees Eve as representing something so much bigger.
Yeah, like connected to the unconscious.
Yes. And all the stuff that's like hidden beneath the surface.
The mysteries,
The mysteries. Okay, so we talked about Adam being like the conscious mind.
Right. Trying to order the world.
Putting everything in its place.
Labeling, categorizing.
Yeah, exactly. So what does that make Eve, in Peterson's view?
Well, he says she represents everything that hasn't been named yet.
Ooh, I like that.
Everything that's still wild and unknown.
Okay.
Like, she's the voice of intuition.
Intuition,
Creativity, those forces that we can't always explain.
the stuff that comes from the gut,
Oh, exactly. It's like she's offering a different way of knowing the world.
a different perspective.
Yeah, one that Adam, with all his logic and reason, might miss.
And this isn't a bad thing, right?
No, not at all. In fact, Peterson sees it as a necessary tension,
Yeah.
like a balance between these two forces.
You need both.
Exactly. The conscious and the unconscious, the masculine and the feminine.
He even talks about that Hebrew word for Eve again.
Ezer kenegdo.
Yeah, the helpmeet idea.
Right, it's about partnership, not subservience.
Like they need each other.
They do, to fully understand the world and, like, their place in it.
But then there's the whole temptation thing.
Right, the apple.
Yeah, and what Peterson says about that is really interesting.
What's that?
He says Eve's temptation is in believing that her compassion can conquer everything.
Oh, wow, that's deep.
Right, like that her love and empathy can transform even the most dangerous things.
So it's not about her being evil.
No, not at all. It's about the dangers of, like, unchecked compassion.
Of thinking you can just hug the darkness away.
Yeah. There's real darkness out there, and
Yeah.
sometimes you have to recognize that.
It's like he's saying, we need both Adam and Eve.
We do. To navigate the complexities of life.
To find that balance between order and chaos, reason and intuition.
It's a lot to think about, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
But that's what I love about this book.
Me too.
It makes you think. It challenges your assumptions.
It doesn't give you easy answers.
No, it doesn't. It makes you wrestle with these big questions.
And that's the point, right?
Exactly. To keep wrestling, to keep exploring, to keep growing.
To keep the conversation going.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, we've only scratched the surface here.
Oh, there's so much more in the book.
So much more. But hopefully this has given you a taste.
A little glimpse into Peterson's world.
Yeah, and if you're intrigued,
Definitely pick up the book.
We Who Wrestle with God. It's a wild ride, but it's worth it.
It will definitely make you think.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time.
Keep wrestling with those big ideas.
And keep those conversations flowing.